Chapter 12, People Power. There is one additional question I would like to bring to my readers' attention. At the moment you are engaged in the process of creating a people strategy for the future development of the Russian state. Part of this strategy has been published in issues of the Almanac. Part appears on the Anastasia site on the internet. As I see it, the overwhelming majority of the materials is extremely interesting. However, there is one question about power and authority. That has not been sufficiently illuminated, yet it is a most important question. I invite you to join me in contemplating it. For starters, I'd like to share my own reasonings with you. Power often changes. Just over the past 100 years, people have lived under the Tsar, the communists, and a series of democratic rulers. Power gets changed, but life does not get rearranged for the better. Why? Do bad people always come to power? Hardly. It is more likely that the current system makes any politicians who get elected to power ineffective pen pushers when it comes to solving the problems involved in any real betterment of people's lives. Take our legislative assemblies over the most recent parliamentary terms. It seems that we vote for normal, family-type people, and then, once they're in power, they come up with, to put it mildly, some rather strange legislation. Why? Perhaps in the process of coming to power, they fall into another world, a world isolated from the people, an apartment in the parliamentary living quarters, a car equipped with its own flashing light on top, a private office where the public is denied entry, along with all sorts of special perks and vanity of vanities. Anastasia's grandfather suggested an interesting piece of draft legislation concerning deputies of the State Duma. They should each be granted a piece of land and definitely live in a community built on that land, right out among the people. A law faculty graduate in Ukraine named Tatiana Borodina has drafted a bill to this effect, and I think it is worth reproducing its major clauses here in the book, so that my readers can pass on the proposal to their own elected representatives in legislative assemblies at all levels. Moreover, I call upon my readers to be sure to take part in regional and federal elections, but to vote in only those candidates who live in their own kin's domains. But is it merely a passport stamp that defines someone as a Russian citizen? In many cases, a candidate on the ballot has Russian citizenship and a Moscow residence permit, but has a fashionable domain located in another country. Is he going to be mindful of the needs of ordinary Russian people? Most probably, his thoughts will be oriented in a completely different direction. If a candidate has his own little motherland, his family domain in Russia, and lives there among Russian citizens, his work can be expected to bring benefit to those citizens and to the motherland as a whole. This much is becoming clear to many people. Students are even beginning to draft laws to assist the legislators. A law of Russia on family communities created by Russian people's deputies on all levels. Draft. The law defines the legal, social, and economic provisions for the creation and maintenance of family communities and family domains on the part of Russian people's deputies, thereby guaranteeing the right of Russian citizens, as proclaimed in Russia's constitution, to hold land as the foundation for the wealth of the nation. The law is aimed at the creation of favorable working conditions for Russian people's deputies, conducive to the development, drafting, and adoption of federal legislation, as well as guaranteeing their maximum contact with voters. Article 1. Basic terms and concepts used in the law. Certain specific terms in the law are defined as follows. Family domain. A plot of land from 1 to 1.3 hectares in size granted to age of majority Russian citizens for their lifetime use, with the right of inheritance with no tax obligations in respect to the land or its produce. Family community. A center of population organized on the principles of local self-government, consisting of family domains as well as socio-cultural and community facilities. Lifetime use. Unconditional ownership and use of a plot of land free of charge and in perpetuity. Living fence. A hedge consisting of trees and shrubs planted around the perimeter of a family domain or a family community. Article 2. Legislation on family domains and family communities. The procedures involved in granting a Russian People's Deputy an allotment of land for the creation of a family community, as well as the definition of the legal status of family domains and family communities and their functions, are all governed by the Russian Constitution, the Russian Land Code, this law, the Russian law on family domains and family communities, as well as other applicable laws. Article 3. Basic principles of legislation governing family communities. The creation of family communities by Russian People's Deputies is subject to the following basic principles. A. Compliance with the law. B. The setting of conditions for the implementation by all Russian citizens of their right to hold land as the foundation for the wealth of the nation. C. The principle that ownership and use of the plot of land granted for the creation of a family domain shall be free of charge, unconditional, and in perpetuity. D. Exemption of the owner of a family domain from payment of taxes on the sale of produce grown or goods produced on said family domain. E. The creation of one family community by one Russian People's Deputy of the current parliamentary term. F. Other applicable principles. Article 4. Purview of the law. The purview of this law covers Russian People's Deputies at all levels of government who are elected in accordance with electoral laws, as well as age of majority Russian citizens who have expressed a desire to live in a family community organized on the principles set forth in this law. Article 5. Granting an allotment of land to a Russian People's Deputy for the creation of a family community. Each Russian People's Deputy serving a current or future term within a year from the date of his election shall be granted an allotment of land of at least 150 hectares in size whereon to establish a family community, hereinafter land allotment. 2. Upon election as a Russian People's Deputy under the proportional system from a political party's or a party alliance's candidates list in a nationwide election, the successful candidate shall be granted a land allotment in a region of Russia of his choosing. Upon election as a Russian People's Deputy by a majority of voters in a single representative electoral district, the successful candidate shall be granted a land allotment on the territory of the district where he is elected. 3. A single family community shall not be created by two or more Russian People's Deputies. Neither shall two or more Russian People's Deputies be permitted to live in the same family community during the same term of office. 4. The land allotment is granted as a single parcel of land, including any water resources thereon, from properties belonging to the state or already held communally. Land may also be expropriated from people making full-time use of it and transferred to a Russian People's Deputy for the creation of a family community. 5. If required, land may be purchased from property owners for community needs, in which case the property owner must be given a minimum of a year's notice in writing by the respective decision-making body, and must also give his own consent to the sale. The purchase price is to be determined by an expert's assessment of the land's monetary value, which is to be carried out in accordance with the methodology established by the Federal Cabinet. 6. A plot of land recommended for inclusion in the land allotment for the creation of a family community by a Russian People's Deputy, but which is in possession of a physical or legal person, may, with the agreement of the property owner, be exchanged for another plot of land of equal value, either in the same region or in another region of Russia, depending on the property owner's preference. 7. Russian citizens who own plots of land or shares in real, individually registered plots of land adjacent to the territory of a proposed family community have the right to reassign their properties without monetary payment for the purposes of creating a family community by a Russian People's Deputy, and receive in return a plot of land within said community, whereon to create a family domain for their lifetime use. 8. A Russian citizen who owns virtual shares in communal, not individually registered plots of land, has the right to transfer his shares, either wholly or in part, no less than 1 hectare in size, for the purposes of creating a family community by a Russian People's Deputy, and receive in return a plot of land within the said community, whereon to create a family domain for his lifetime use. Article 6. Land composition in family communities. 1. The land in a family community is comprised of the following types of plots. Land plots for the creation of a family domain. Land plots for the creation of family domains on the part of children of a Russian People's Deputy, no more than 2 plots per community. Land plots reserved for socio-cultural and community purposes are designated in accordance with the overall plan of the family community. The aggregate of such plots is not to exceed 7% of the total area of the community. The said plots are under the jurisdiction of the local council of the said family community. 3. The remaining portion of the land allotment is to be divided into plots of land for the creation of family domains of no less than 1 hectare each. The size may be extended to 1.3 hectares depending on the peculiarities of the terrain and other pertinent factors. 4. Between all land plots, walkways must be created, no less than 3 or 4 meters wide. Each plot owner has the right to plant a living fence around the perimeter of his family domain. 5. On plots of land designated for the creation of a family domain, Russian citizens have the right to plant trees and shrubs, including those of the forest variety, to create artificial reservoirs, construct houses and outbuildings, and erect ancillary structures and other facilities, provided principles of good neighborliness are observed. Article 7. Order of distribution of land plots designated for the creation of family domains among Russian citizens. 1. In the proposed family communities, the Russian People's Deputies have the right to be the first to select for themselves 1 land plot for the creation of a family domain for their lifetime use with the right of inheritance. 2. Each child of a Russian People's Deputy with a family of his own has the right to receive a land plot for the creation of a family domain for his lifetime use. 3. It is mandatory that 1 or 2 land plots in the family community be granted to refugees or to children from orphanages. 4. Russian People's Deputies, at their discretion, have the right to grant the Russian citizens of their choosing up to 30% of the remaining land plots whereon said citizens are to create their own family domains. 5. The remaining land plots should be given to Russian citizens belonging to a variety of social classes: entrepreneurs, social workers, pensioners, representatives of the creative intelligentsia, military personnel, etc. Land plots are to be distributed among Russian citizens on the basis of a lottery conducted openly at the general meeting of future residents of each family community. Article 8. Local councils of family communities. 1. The local council of each family community comprises those living in said community, united by the fact of their permanent residence within the boundaries of said community, which constitutes a self-contained administrative territorial entity. 2. The local council of the family community has the right to create a representative organ of local self-government, namely the Family Community Council, whose members are drawn exclusively from among the residents of the said community. 3. Russian People's Deputies are prohibited from standing for election or being elected to the Family Community Council. In cases where a Russian People's Deputy is elected to a Family Community Council, their election shall be declared null and void. 4. The procedures for setting up local self-government are regulated by the bylaws of the local council of the family community, hereinafter bylaws, which said council has the right to adopt at one of its meetings or by a local referendum. The bylaws must be registered with the district office of the Ministry of Justice. Article 9. Status of land plots in respect to creating a family domain. 1. Plots of land designated for the creation of family domains are granted for lifetime use with the right of inheritance only to citizens of Russia. It is forbidden to grant land plots for family domains to citizens of foreign countries or to stateless persons, except those who have been granted legal refugee status, but no more than 2 such families are permitted per family community created by a Russian People's Deputy. I don't know how much time I had spent walking around while Anastasia's grandfather familiarized himself with the contents of the documents I had brought with me, when all of a sudden I heard a loud and raucous outburst of laughter, which sounded not at all like that of an old man. He was still laughing when I dashed over to him. "That's rich. Oh, that really makes me laugh. Thank you, Vladimir. And to think I didn't want to get into these at first. But now that you are into them, what's so funny? After all, this is a most serious situation, and an extremely complicated one." "Extremely complicated for whom?" grandfather asked. "For me and for my readers wishing to build the domains Anastasia talked about." Quite possibly in uttering these words I might have sounded irritated and hurt. Grandfather stopped laughing, looked at me intently, and replied quietly and seriously, "To this day I cannot understand why my grandfather would have anything to do with you, let alone bear children with you. Only don't be mad at this old man, Vladimir. Maybe I don't get it, which means others too may not get it. But it's possible that in this not getting it lies a great truth. And so I don't have any bad feelings toward you, and I don't condemn my granddaughter. On the contrary, I'm very excited about what's been achieved." "But is there anything specific you have to say about the contents of these documents?" "I have already said it. I'm excited about what's been achieved." "By whom?" "By my granddaughter." "But I was asking about what I had written." Grandfather looked at first at the packet of documents and then silently and intently at me before replying. "I really can't say, Vladimir, just how necessary your appeal to the public really is. Maybe it is indeed important for them. As I see it, what I read simply confirms that even back 10 years ago my granddaughter foresaw all these ups and downs, and long ago everything that seems to be working against you she's turned into something beneficial." "How can you call offending my readers and me beneficial?" "Did you realize who's been offending you and your readers? Some kind of entity that's set itself up under the cover of Russia's Orthodox Church." "And it provoked a feeling in you of being offended?" "Yeah." "Well, that's good. Now it's not just with your mind, but with the feelings that you and many of your readers have experienced that you can understand how your forebears were defamed in the eyes of their descendants, how they were called pagans and for centuries were blamed for all sorts of misdeeds they never committed. You're not the only one who's tried to write about this. There have been quite a few historians over the centuries who have tried to refute this slander, but in vain. What's happening now is that the same tactics are being used all over again to discredit people who really want to reach out and touch God's creations. There are quite a few of these people now, and they can feel by their own experience how their forebears were smeared like that. The souls of their distant ancestors are finding renewed strength through those being slandered in our time. Their forebears of yesterday will act like guardian angels protecting their descendants of today. Believe me, there can be no kinder and brighter force, no way, than that which is emerging in the world right now. If this is coming about for people today, if some invisible thread is capable of joining today's son together with his parent who lived 2,000 years ago, and if the thread that joins them together can be extended, then today's man will be joined together with God, his original parent. Grandfather was clearly trying to restrain his excitement as he told me this, but I felt I needed further clarification. Maybe what you say is very important, I observed, but you see, there's been quite a bit of delay with the creation of family domains. But just maybe such a delay is necessary to give people the opportunity to figure things out and to co-create a design for the future. Maybe. It's all turning out rather unexpectedly, as though the first book began with just simple actions. Then, with the second, came readers' clubs, and now, with the Book of Kin out, the family chronicle has come along. These words made Grandfather laugh again, but he immediately cut himself short and said with a kindly smile, "My granddaughter was clearly having a fun time with that family chronicle. Maybe it was to comfort you and your readers somehow, but hey, look how she arranged it so that Russia's supreme rulers and the patriarch of the church supported her idea. Even if it's just one of her ideas. No mention of her philosophy, or maybe they simply didn't understand it. Their names will not go down in the annals of old. They're too wishy-washy, not very bold. People will be eternally remembered in the annals of old who are right now, at least in their thoughts, creating their own God-pleasing domains, whether they themselves choose the idea or whether it chose them. That doesn't matter anymore. Eternity awaits those who are co-creating a future for their children, and not just for their children, but for themselves too. For the first time on earth, man, who is born for eternity, will come back to eternity. Vladimir, I'm just beginning to understand my granddaughter's achievements. It is possible that many secrets of life have been revealed to her, but there is one which even the high priests were not fully aware of. All they ever knew before was that human life could be eternal. Part of this knowledge allowed them, for example, to be reincarnated over and over. But this reincarnation was never complete, and this is why their achievements did not bring joy either to themselves or to mankind. Now I am confident, and believe me, that Anastasia has full knowledge of the creations needed to attain eternity. You might ask her about this and try to understand, and if she can come up with the words that a great many people will understand, worlds worthy of God-man will be unfurled to their thought. Take a walk over to my granddaughter Vladimir and have a talk with her. At the moment, she's sitting under the cedar, down by the lake shore. There may be significant revealings in the world all around when the words of eternity are found which are comprehensible to both mind and feelings. The aspirations of the great awakened civilization will whirl upward. The whole galaxy will feel these great aspirations and will await with shivers of anticipation the touch of those capable of giving to the planets a new and marvelous life. Go, and be not slow. I had already taken several steps out when I was stopped by Anastasia's grandfather crying out, "Vladimir, it's high time that you and Anastasia's followers started your own motherland party." "A party? What kind of party?" "I'm telling you, that's what you should call it, the Motherland Party." Chapter 13. A New Civilization. Anastasia was sitting beneath the cedar tree, wearing a light gray flaxen dress. With her arms around her knees and her head slightly lowered, she was gazing out at the smooth surface of the lake. I didn't go up to her right away. For a while I stood at a distance, observing this recluse quietly sitting there by the lake shore. No, that description really doesn't fit Anastasia. The word recluse is better suited to the people who live in modern apartments. People live in these apartments and don't even know their neighbors sharing the same floor. They walk along the street and couldn't care less about the people they meet, and their attitude is entirely reciprocal. So, while there's nothing frightening in someone living alone, it's a lot more frightening when they're alone amongst people like themselves. And so, even though Anastasia was sitting here alone on the shore of this Taiga lake, her heart was beating in unison with millions of human hearts all over the world. Some call her their friend, some their sister, feeling like they're related to her. In the meantime, her soft-spoken words wing their way through the endless flow of information, thundering and dundering from TV screens and a host of other media. Her words waft by, and people pick them up. And people who catch them may respond with guitar strings and songs, and often with actions. They retune their life anew. And grandfather, I saw for the first time how fervently he expressed himself as he asked me to have a word with Anastasia about eternity. I sat down beside her, and she turned her head toward me. I felt a calming sense from the tender gaze of her grayish-blue eyes. For a time we simply sat and looked at each other. I couldn't help myself, but took her hand, gave it a quick kiss, and then replaced it on her knees. Her cheeks were aflush with a soft glow, her eyelashes all aflutter. And without rhyme or reason, a sense of unease came over me. How strange to feel uneasy over a woman one has known for 10 years, and how delightful. And in an attempt to overcome my sense of awkwardness and unease, I broke the silence first. I was talking with your grandfather just now, Anastasia. For some reason, he quite unexpectedly and rather excitedly started saying something about humanity's need for words on eternity. He said these words should be the kind people can grasp, not just with their mind or intellect, but with their feelings. And these words... Are these words really that important? Yes, they are important, Vladimir, but it is not the words that are important, but rather people's conscious awareness. Words, of course, are necessary to bring it forth. A conscious awareness of eternal life will help perfect man's way of life. But what connection is there between our way of life and becoming consciously aware of eternity? A direct connection. People today believe that they have only a few decades to live, after which they must leave life behind and disappear into oblivion. Yet all along, man's life can be eternal. This must be brought out so that everyone, or at least most people, may understand. But you talked about that already, and I've included your words on this subject in several of my books. Yes, I did, but evidently what I said has not been understood. Or the frailty of human existence has been drummed into people's consciousness too strongly over the millennia. New words and arguments must be found. So can you try to find them? I shall try. We need to look for them, apparently, along with those who will understand. But tell me in your own words first. Fine. Perhaps we should put it this way. Most people living on the earth believe that they plan out their own life. They choose a profession, start a family, have children, or alternatively decline to have children. But in many respects, their decisions are not their own. A great influence is exercised upon them by somebody else's will, acting through public opinion. For example, you have an object called a clothes hanger. At one point, somebody decided to perfect this object by using man himself as a clothes hanger. This gave rise to the profession you call modeling, from the word model. It is not an enviable profession. It is not part of man's destiny. But somebody decided to make it one of the most attractive professions of all, and did so. They began to show off live models in a variety of color magazine photos and TV shows, and to describe their supposedly happy lives, to tell about all the money they make and how rich people want to marry them. Millions of young girls began to dream of becoming the world's next top model and thereby attaining happiness. Millions of young girls all over the world began resorting to all sorts of measures in an in an effort to achieve this illusory glory. 1 in a million made it as a famous model, essentially becoming a walking clothes hanger. The others experienced deep disappointment in their lives, and their dream was not fulfilled. And this was due to their failure to determine their own destiny. They had begun structuring their lives under the influence of someone else's will. There are many other examples that could be cited of men and women and even children chasing illusory values, neglecting their own purpose and destiny. Tell me what you think, Vladimir. If human society is made up of people like that, where can it be heading? It's heading nowhere. That kind of human society. Out there in our country, Russia, not a single political party, nor the state as a whole, has put forth any kind of program for building the future. From what you have told me, Anastasia, I am particularly interested in the definition of man's purpose and destiny. What does it consist of? How can people discover it? Let your thought, Vladimir, as well as other people's thoughts, try to grasp hold of God's creations, His program, His dream. But is that really possible? Grasping hold of God's dream, I mean? It is possible. After all, He has hid nothing and still hides nothing from people. From children who are His very own, He has written no scholarly tomes. Everything by example He has shown. And the first thing everyone needs to understand and feel is which of man's deeds to eternity lead. Think for yourself, Vladimir. Why did not God, who created the living and multifaceted world, not create things like the car, the TV, and the spaceship in their present form? Perhaps He simply wasn't up to the job, whereas man is? God created everything man needs. Man has within himself a means of transportation as well as imagination through which he can see far better pictures than are shown on TV. Man is also capable of affecting the mastery of other planets of the universe without the aid of primitive artificial projectiles. It was God who determined man's purpose and destiny as well as the program of development for all life in the universe. To attain the required understanding, man needs to refrain from destroying his program and to study, for all he's worth, and ascertain the purpose of everything on the earth. Immortality. God created man immortal. To witness this, only 3 conditions are required to be observed. First, create a living space which will attract man to itself and to which man has aspired. Second, there should be, somewhere on the earth, at least one person who thinks of you with kindness and love. Third, never even admit the thought that you can be overtaken by death. And this is extremely important. Even if you suggest to someone who is simply falling asleep that he is dying and he believes it, then he will die, in obedience to his thought. But even if an elderly man, in earth terms, wears out his body and is lying at death's door, but does not think about death, but pictures his life in the living space he has been creating, he will be born anew. Such is the law of the universe. The universe will not stand by and allow a life-creating thought to die. You have a concept in your world known as natural selection. Even now, God's program is selecting the best of everything for a re-embodiment. Before, however, there was not much to choose from. Now it is showing a multifold increase. Whoever builds a domain with love will be reincarnated again and again. Whatever interferes with them will disappear from the earth forever, giving way to the birth of a new civilization. But why a new civilization, I asked, if the people are going to be the same, with the same vegetation and the same planet? The new civilization, Vladimir, will be characterized by a new conscious awareness as well as by new perceptions of the surrounding world. This great principle that has been given birth in people today will remain invisible to ordinary sight until the appearance of the planet known as the Earth has changed. It will affect life in the universe as a whole. But how can the universe change as a result of the Earth's appearance? It can, Vladimir. Even though our planet is but a small particle, it is in close interaction with the other parts of the universe. Even if one small particle should change, its changes can influence the whole spectrum of the universe. Most interesting, but couldn't you show me, Anastasia, a scene from the future as to how the universe might change? I can indeed. Take a look. Love creating worlds. Spring was in full bloom on the planet Arreta. Herbs very similar to those on Earth, along with flowers on trees and bushes, were giving off their sweet scent. A young man named Vladislav was walking along a pathway amidst the springtime splendor on his way to a symposium. He was to give a talk on the origins of life on the planet Arreta. His debating opponent would be his childhood friend, Radomir. At 19 years old, Vladislav had an adequate store of data to defend his theory before scholars at any level, but the knowledge possessed by his friend Radomir was no less in scope. Radomir and his team would pounce on any weak points or unsupported reasoning in Vladislav's arguments regarding events in the past. Lyudmila would be there too. Lyudmila, as it happened, both lads had been in love with this girl right from childhood. They loved her but never admitted it to each other or to the girl. Instead, they were waiting for Lyudmila herself to give some kind of indication as to whom she preferred. Vladislav had deliberately chosen a roundabout route to where the symposium was being held, in order to give more thought to his presentation. But something was interfering with his concentration. He had the impression that somebody was watching him. Upon hearing a rustle behind him, he did a sharp about-face. Someone darted from the path into the bushes and was lying still in the tall grass. Vladislav took a few steps back the way he had come and caught sight of a figure hiding in the grasses under a bush. It was his 4-year-old sister, Katya. "So, Katarinka, you've latched on to me again, eh?" Vladislav tenderly addressed his sister. "I've got an important presentation coming up. Maybe you don't realize it, but you're getting in the way. Or maybe you do realize it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be hiding there in the grasses." "I'm not hiding. I'm just lying here," replied Katya. "I'm looking at this flower and all the different little bugs." And she made it look as though she were really interested in a particular little flower. "Well now, then you can just go on lying there looking at them. I'm off." Katya jumped up at once and ran over to Vladislav. "Go ahead, Vadichek," she started rattling off. "I'll follow you ever so quietly, so as not to interfere with your thinking. When we get to the place where all the people are, you take me by the hand so that everyone can see what a handsome and clever big brother I have." "Okay, don't try to sweet-talk me. Here, give me your hand. Only remember, when I or somebody else is presenting, don't even think of criticizing what the grown-ups say like the last time." Katarinka, now satisfied, grasped hold of Vladislav's hand and promised, "I shall try with all my might not to criticize." Representatives of the different regions of the planet Arreta, both young and old, filled the natural amphitheater. Nobody carried pens, notepads, or any kind of writing materials. Their natural memory allowed them to memorize what they heard down to the minutest detail. Vladislav carried no exhibits with him as he walked out on stage. With just the power of his thought, he would be able to create holograms in space to show any scenes from the past he wished. Reproduce household objects or even feelings. With just a hint of uneasiness, Vladislav began his presentation. The planet on which we live is called Arreta. It is more than 90 sextillion years old, but life began here no more than 300 years ago. For originating life here, we are indebted to our forebears, two inhabitants of the planet Earth. To put it more specifically, the originating of life on the planet Arreta was due to the influence of the energy of love and the dream of two inhabitants of the planet Earth. For this reason, I offer you some historical information about life on the planet Earth. The earliest period of people's life on Earth was quite possibly similar to our own. They had a good knowledge and feeling of their planet and the purpose of the universe. Earth dwellers determined the purpose of all the living organisms of their planet and made efficient use of them. But one day, a disaster occurred. The consciousness of one of the Earth's inhabitants was invaded by a virus, which soon spread intensively among the other inhabitants of the planet. Our scientists have termed this virus death. The outward signs of this virus, is indicated by historical records, are characterized as follows. The people infected by it started to destroy their own perfect variety of life on this planet, creating in its place a primitive artificial world. This period of life Earth dwellers themselves referred to as the technocratic age. The people infected by the death virus began mutating from rational beings into anti-rational beings. They gathered together in large numbers on small plots of land and built themselves dwellings that looked like stone tombs, piled one on top of another. Picture to yourselves a stone mountain with a whole lot of burrows hollowed out in it. It was something quite similar to these stone mountains that people built with their hands called apartment blocks. The tomb burrows in this artificial mountain were called apartments. A massive concentration of these artificial stone mountains with their burrows piled up one beside the other was called a city. These so-called cities were filled with air unfit to breathe and water unfit to drink, along with stale food. Even during Earth dwellers' lifetime, various organs of the human anatomy would begin to decay and decompose. Of course, it is difficult to imagine human bodies walking around containing decaying and decomposing organs, but that's exactly how it was. Historical sources indicate that people of the technocratic age even had a science they called medicine. They considered one of the big achievements of this science to be the ability to replace their internal organs. People did not understand that the very existence of such a science proved the inadequacy of their consciousness. It was not only people's flesh that was subject to decomposition. There was an intensive degradation of their mind and consciousness too. Their thought slowed down. They even lost the ability to compute sums and invented a calculator. They lost their ability to create holograms in space and invented a device they called a television, a primitive mechanism displaying something like a hologram. They lost the ability to move themselves through space and began building artificial devices known as cars, airplanes, and spaceships. From time to time, certain groups of people would attack other groups and they would kill each other. But most incredible of all, the death virus gave people the notion that they were not eternal, but existed only temporarily in the space they could mentally grasp hold of. More and more, the actions of people of the technocratic age transformed the planet into a foul-smelling, smoke-stenched corner of the universe. But the mind of the universe kept waiting for something and refrained from destroying this deleterious place in the galaxy. "Stop, please, for a moment." Vladislav's presentation was interrupted by a voice coming from the group of his debating opponents headed by his friend Vladimir. "It is senseless to continue with your talk. It would have been impossible for something like that to happen on the Earth." "All right, I shall break off my presentation if you can really prove the improbability of what I have said." From among the group of opponents, one young man stood up and argued as follows. "We have reliable reports about the existence of religion in Earth society. Religious treatises talked about the earth and everything growing thereon as being created in the mind of the universe, which they called God. They worshipped him and performed many rituals in his honor. I trust, my dear presenter, that you will not deny that fact." "No, I shan't deny it," replied Vladislav. "Then tell me, how could they perform rituals in honor of their God and at the same time destroy his creations? It would be impossible to do both at the same time. Consequently, these densely populated cities you speak of could not have existed on the earth, and people could not have fouled the water created for them by the God they worshipped. In any case, the mind of the universe could not have countenanced such chaos, or he himself could not have been termed a mind. On the contrary, it would call into question any speck of rationality in what he created. Man first and foremost. What have you to say to this, my honorable presenter? I say that the existence of a mind, especially of the universe, is the union of two great principles, mind and anti-mind. The age of the anti-mind was necessary for the people of the planet Earth, and if you will permit me, in the next part of my presentation, I shall prove the existence of two great principles in man. Fine then, carry on. The young man agreed and sat down. Vladislav continued his presentation, now more confidently. The world of the universe is the union of opposites. Man also reflects this union of opposites within himself. Amidst the incredible chaos that has taken over the earth-dwellers' consciousness, all at once there appeared people capable of understanding. These people changed their attitude toward Earth's creations, but not with words and not through the aid of religious treaties. They began to change their way of life. While not yet fully comprehending the scope of their creation, they referred to their actions simply as the building of a family domain. They did not yet know that by approaching the earth with a new conscious awareness, they were beginning to revitalize the planets of the universe. They did not yet know that for them, death would no longer exist, or that the children they gave birth to would be called gods by their descendants. They were simply building their family domains on the planet Earth. In the meantime, the mind of the universe followed their activities with trembling anticipation. And eventually the day came when all the people of the earth began to live in their marvelous domains. And the day came when, look, I shall show you a hologram. It has two people in it. In the space in front of the assembly appeared a three-dimensional earthly landscape. Two elderly people, a man and a woman, were walking hand in hand along a pathway leading from their domain to a nearby forest. They were clearly more than 100 years old. Evening was coming on, and the sky was filled with still barely noticeable stars. The couple walked up to a cedar tree, and the elderly woman leaned her back against it. Here I am, a grandmother now, and a great-grandmother too, the woman tenderly remarked to her companion. And you are still after me to go for a nighttime walk under a starry sky, just like we did when we were young. But isn't that what you want too? Of course I do, my beloved. He quickly grabbed her by the shoulders, gave her an impetuous hug, and kissed her on the lips. Then he pushed the strap of her dress to one side, baring her shoulder. The now bright moonlight clearly revealed 3 birthmarks, all in a row on the woman's left shoulder. The man kissed each one of these in turn. You are just the same as you were before, my beloved. You are. I never want to part from you. And part we shall not. We shall die and be born anew. We can't afford to be born anew, she said sadly. Just look, there's hardly any free land left on the earth. It's all gardens and domains everywhere you look. And it's possible our grandchildren won't have enough room. Probably the Creator failed to take this into account when He created the earth. I don't think so. There's some kind of solution, but we don't know what it is yet. But I am confident that our love cannot be interrupted. You and I shall die to be born again. But where? Look, my beloved, on that star out there. Let our thought create life anew on that planet, similar to life on the earth. Think about it. Why else would God have thought to create so many planets? It just can't be a coincidence. Our thought has a material form. It will create life for us on that lifeless planet. We shall be re-embodied again and again. Our love will be forever the same. I thank you for this marvelous dream, my beloved. Indeed, I do. With you, I shall help you create life on that planet anew. What shall we call it, my beloved, this planet of our new life? Areta, that's what it'll be called. Wait for us, Areta. In the meantime, you can blossom out in gardens and spread yourself with herbs the way I desire, said the man fervently and confidently. Me too, responded the woman. The hologram disappeared. Vladislav bowed to the assembly and stepped off to one side, making his way for his friend and opponent, Radomir. Radomir stood in Vladislav's place, glanced around at the gathering, and began to speak. I beg to disagree with my friend. I shall say right off, in his version of events there is a great deal that is improvable and even contradictory. Like my friends here, I cannot believe in the existence of a period in people's history which is so utterly absurd. The hologram he showed, as we all realize, is only a whim of his thought and imagination and is lacking in confirmation. Though this hologram gave me a kind of strange sensation, it seemed as though my learned friend had taken it from a story already known. I just can't recall what source it is from. A hushed whisper spread through the amphitheater, and cries of plagiarism could be heard. Could it be plagiarism? Unheard of, but perhaps the presenter didn't know. Plagiarism. Yes, there is a distinct impression of something we've seen before here. Vladislav stood to one side and hung his head. He shuddered upon hearing a child's cry from one of the back rows. Ah, his sister Katarinka kept calling out, refusing to be silenced. At least she's just calling out and not criticizing the proceedings, thought Vladislav, but he was wrong. After waiting for the inevitable silence to ensue, Katarinka declared in a loud voice, "Don't even think of arguing with my big brother, 'cause he's very, very clever and sensitive too." "Now there's a weighty argument," someone said, as snickering could be heard all around. "Quite true, very weighty indeed," little Katarinka went on. "And you, my Radomirchik, don't you go fancying Lyudmila. Just don't go fancying her, and that's it." "Katya, keep quiet," Vladislav cried out. "I shan't keep quiet. Lyudmilka loves you, and you love her. I know that for certain." "Katya," Vladislav cried out again, and headed over to where his sister was standing. "Lyudmilka, what are you sitting there for?" exclaimed Katya. "Stop him. He won't let me have my say. He'll drag me away by force." A brown-haired girl rose from the back row, headed toward Vladislav, and stood in his way. Lyudmila's cheeks had broken out in a soft blush. With head lowered, she whispered, "Your sister is right, Vladislav." Her whisper could be heard through the hushed amphitheater. All heads turned toward little Katarinka. People smiled and applauded her. Inspired by the audience's support, the little girl ran down to Radomir, who was still standing on stage. She took up a position right beside him and held up her hands to signal the gathering to quiet down. When all were silent, she started speaking again, this time to Radomir. "You know, Radomirchik, you almost played the traitor there. You mustn't criticize my big brother. He showed everything fair and square. He's your friend. You're his friend. So don't you criticize." Radomir glanced down condescendingly at the little girl beside him, and with equal condescension began speaking to her as well as to the people in the amphitheater. "I am not criticizing. I'm simply stating a fact. There's not enough pieces of evidence in the hologram he showed. In fact, there's none." "There is one, or maybe two," Katarinka firmly declared. "And where might it be, or where might they be, if there's two? One of them is me, and the other is you, Radomirchik," the little girl confidently stated. With these words, she undid 2 buttons on her dress and bared her shoulder. On Katarinka's left shoulder, Radomir glimpsed 3 birthmarks, exactly the same as they had seen on the elderly earth woman in the hologram. Vladimir examined the birthmarks on the little girl's shoulder, and his blood began rushing through his veins. He concentrated on trying to recall something. Then appeared before him a hologram, which only he could see. A country scene on the earth. There he is, kissing the 3 birthmarks on his beloved's shoulder. Then she gives him a hug. She laughs and rumples his hair and kisses the end of his nose, still laughing, as usual. The hologram disappeared. Vladimir looked for a while longer at the little girl standing in front of him. Her shoulder still bare as before. Then he suddenly bent over, took Katarinka in his arms and held her close. Embracing him, she rumpled his hair and gave him a quick kiss on the end of his nose. He kept holding little Katarinka in his arms, and she whispered in his ear, "Either you were in a hurry to be born, Radomirchik, or I was born later than I should have been. Now you must wait while I grow up. Wait 14 years. You won't be happy with anyone else. I'm your better half." "I shall wait till you grow up, my dear," the lad responded quietly. Exhausted by all the excitement, Katarinka now felt calmed down. She put her little head on Radomir's shoulder and fell into a sound sleep. He stood there silently before the hushed amphitheater, holding carefully in his arms his bride-to-be. With his mind, he began drawing letters of the alphabet in space. Those assembled read the text of the hologram he created. There is proof. It is in each one of us. Love is infinite and eternal in the universe. Then, slowly and carefully, so as not to awaken the little girl asleep on his shoulder, Radomir headed for the exit. But he had forgotten to turn off the facial expressions of his thought, and so the hologram continued to sprout more letters. The audience realized that these words were not addressed to them, but they could not help reading them. You ran barefoot through stars, not looking for love, and in no way self-serving, no, never. Throughout infinite space you alone did preserve what we should be preserving together. These words were intended for a little girl of the planet Areta, as well as for the Earth Woman, the goddess who had given life to their planet. The little goddess slept sweetly on Radomir's shoulder. Perhaps she too was hearing in her sleep the words of her beloved. That's terrific, Anastasia. That means that when people follow the divine program and give the whole Earth a makeover, they will also have the opportunity to resettle on other planets? Of course. Otherwise, the very existence of other planets in the universe would be meaningless. But he has infused everything with great meaning. The love between 2 people, a dream born in love, is capable of breathing life into any planet. And again, Anastasia, as I understood it, the people who are now building their domains will not die. They will only change bodies and be reincarnated in life on the spot. Of course, their actions on the earth are more needed than anyone else's. They please God, and even people who have never managed to touch the earth with their hands, but have mentally begun to build their own future living corner of paradise, are many times more needful to the divine program than hundreds of wise men sitting behind stone walls. Men who have cut themselves off from God's creation simply talking about God and spirituality. Their words are blasphemous and sad. Death without reincarnation awaits them. They can look forward to a fearful fate, but far from being God's punishment, this is what they have chosen as their own destiny. God has shone forth in the universe with a new thought. It is not only a great energy, but a judge as well. Much has been said in treatises and legends about God's judgment. It is now coming softly and invisibly, God's judgment. It touches all the people now living on the planet, and every man will be his own judge. Whoever chooses life and creates living life will be eternal and resemble the grand creator of the universe. Whoever visualizes death in his imagination is doomed to death by his own thought. It seemed as though these words of hers, spoken with a soft and confident tone on the bank of the river Ab, were taken up by the space like an echo over the earth. Over the past 10 years, I have not been the only one who has learned how Anastasia is able to create the future through her thoughts and words. As my boat took me further and further up the river, I could see her still standing on the shore. The space around picked up her words on eternal life and repeated them over and over. From what galaxies, or from what other worlds of the universe, I all at once began to wonder, did Anastasia appear in her earthly likeness and impart a conscious awareness of eternity to the planet Earth? She is not one to lightly toss out words at random turns, and this has been confirmed in real life. And that being the case, my dear readers, I must offer you my heartiest congratulations on your conscious awareness. We shall live forever, co-creating life in the universe. Till our next joyful meeting, dear friends. End of part 1.